The letter came wrapped in parchment, sealed with wax the color of dried blood. Wren Harland, it read in looping calligraphy, you are cordially invited to the annual Harland Harvest Gala. I stared at it for a long time. The same family crest embossed in gold, an apple branch, 2 leaves, and a snake that had once been branded onto the crates of our orchard. The orchard that wasn't mine anymore. Outside my workshop window, the sun sank behind the pines, throwing copper light across the rows of cider barrels I'd built from scratch. Harland Ridge ciders, small batch, handcrafted, self-made. Everything my father said I'd never amount to without his name. The invitation felt like a dare. I should have thrown it into the fire. Instead, I tucked it into my jacket and drove north. By sunset, the Harland estate appeared through the fog. The same Victorian manor I grew up in, the same porch swing where my mother used to sit, where she whispered her last apology before she died. The apple trees lined the drive, hundreds of them, skeletal now in the autumn chill. I could still trace which row I'd planted by hand when I was 16. My father had called it practice for real work. The front door opened before I knocked. Lydia stood there, my stepmother, immaculate as always, red lips, black dress, not a single hair out of place. The kind of beauty that didn't age, only sharpened. "Wren," she said like a foreign word she didn't want to pronounce. "We didn't expect you to come. Then you shouldn't have sent the invitation." Her eyes flicked to the envelope in my hand. Ah, that. Behind her, my half-brother Mason descended the grand staircase. Custom suit, polished shoes, a glass of aged brandy in hand. He looked like our father, only crueler. "She's not here to cause trouble, I hope." "She's here to listen," Lydia said smoothly. "Your father will make the announcement soon." Announcement. That word hooked under my ribs. I followed them into the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers, polished mahogany, the same portraits of dead men watching from the walls, the same air of rot disguised as refinement. The room filled quickly, investors, local politicians, family friends, all waiting for the great William Harland to make his speech. I stayed near the back, invisible in my leather jacket and mud-stained boots. Then he appeared, my father, gray now but still commanding. Still the kind of man whose voice could silence a room without raising it. "Tonight," he began, "we celebrate the future of Harland Orchards. And I'm proud to announce a new chapter, a merger that will secure our family legacy for generations." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. My father smiled thinly. "The Harland estate, orchards, and all associated assets will be transferred to my son, Mason Harland." Applause, cameras, champagne glasses clinking. I felt the words cut through me like frost. He didn't look at me once. Not even when he added, "As for Wren, she's chosen her own path. We wish her independence." Lydia's lips curved. Mason's glass lifted in a mock toast. I turned to leave. I didn't belong here, hadn't for years. But as I walked out, something strange caught my eye. Near the auction table, a stack of files labeled Orchard Redevelopment, Urban Holdings. I froze. That name, Urban Holdings, was the same one that had tried to buy my cider company last year under a different shell name. The merger wasn't a celebration, it was a cover-up. And Mason wasn't inheriting an orchard, he was selling it. My orchard, my mother's orchard. The drive home was silent except for the hum of the truck and the storm pressing at the windshield. I pulled over once, near the ridge that overlooked the orchard. The rows of trees stretched below like scars, all bare and brittle, but I could still smell them, apple bark, sawdust, autumn rot. My father was selling them off. The soil my mother and I tended barefoot as children gone for condos and conference centers. My hands tightened on the steering wheel until my palms burned. I remembered planting those trees with her, how she taught me to prune without cutting too deep, to graft without hurting the root. "You can shape a tree any way you want, Wren," she'd said, "but never forget it remembers every wound." When she died, my father bulldozed her garden to build a new tasting room. He'd said grief shouldn't be sentimental. I'd left 2 weeks later. Never came back, until now. By the time I reached my workshop, the rain had turned to sleet. The roof pinged with ice. I flipped the breaker, flooding the space with yellow light. My barrels lined the walls, each one carved with my logo, a single apple core in the shape of a flame. Harland's Fire. The brand had made me more money in 3 years than his estate ever did in 10. But money wasn't the point anymore. This was about something older, deeper, the soil-level betrayal of bloodlines. I spread the auction files I'd stolen across my workbench. Lydia's handwriting was all over them, elegant, exacting. Terms like redevelopment, liquidation of non-performing assets, urban parcel subdivision. They'd mortgaged everything 6 months ago: the house, the land, the workers' pensions. Mason's architecture firm was fronting the restoration project. But it wasn't restoration, it was dismantling. And Urban Holdings, a shell company registered in Delaware. I dug deeper into my records. My own legal advisor, Theo, had flagged that name once. I scrolled through the old emails until I found it, an offer made 2 months prior to acquire Harlan's Fire for strategic synergy. Signed by an executive named Lydia Rowan. Rowan, my stepmother's maiden name. It wasn't Mason's idea, it was hers. She was cutting my father out too. I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound that echoed in the cold workshop. Of course, Lydia was never sentimental. She was efficient. By morning, I'd made a decision. If she wanted to turn our family's orchard into her empire, she'd have to build it on ashes. And I'd be the one to light the match. Theo arrived just after sunrise, still in his lawyer-gray trench coat, coffee in hand. He took one look at my workbench covered in files and exhaled. "Ren, tell me you didn't break into your father's gala again." "Define break. Did you walk through the front door?" "Yes." "Then it's trespassing." "Not if I was invited," I said, showing him the wax-sealed invitation. He squinted. "That looks forged." "Maybe, but it worked." He pinched the bridge of his nose. "I'm going to regret asking, but what did you do this time?" "Nothing yet," I said, tapping the stack of contracts. "But Lydia did." I walked him through everything: the redevelopment plan, the Urban Holdings connection, the hidden shell company. By the time I finished, he looked more alert than caffeine could account for. "So your stepmother's trying to sell the orchard," he said, "without your father's knowledge. She's trying to sell everything, and Mason's the puppet signing the papers." Theo studied me for a long moment. "You want to stop it? I want to own it." He smiled faintly. "Revenge through real estate. I like your style." By noon, we had a plan. Theo had already handled acquisitions for clients dealing with bankruptcy. The orchard's debts were bad enough that the family trust could be bought out quietly through a subsidiary, like Lydia did to me. We just needed leverage, and I had it. I opened my safe and pulled out a small, sealed envelope. Inside were deeds, 30 acres on the North Ridge. The only part of the orchard my father had never touched. I'd bought it years ago, under my mother's maiden name. "It borders the main property," I said. "Legally, they can't sell without the right of access, which means they can't redevelop without my consent." Theo grinned. "And if they try, I cut their access roads." He raised his coffee cup in mock salute. "God bless zoning law." We filed paperwork that afternoon. The name on the new holding company, Ironbark Estates LLC. By sunset, it legally owned the liens to the Harland family's north and west boundaries. A quiet chokehold. Still, it wasn't enough. I didn't just want to stop them. I wanted them to see what they'd done, to realize too late what they'd lost. The next week, the estate buzzed with preparations. The Harvest Gala had turned into a full-scale investor showcase. Lydia had arranged for live coverage, local news, financial blogs, even a regional food magazine, all there to see Mason revolutionize agricultural luxury. I arrived as a vendor. Harlan's Fire had been invited to provide artisan ciders for the tasting bar. Lydia's assistant sent the order herself. The irony was delicious. I wore a simple linen shirt and black trousers, hair tied back, boots polished but not disguised. My crates were stamped clean and sharp, handcrafted by Ren Harland. Mason didn't notice at first, too busy preening for the cameras. Lydia, though, she saw me the moment I unloaded the first barrel. Her smile froze, eyes narrowing like a hawk's. "You have a lot of nerve." "I have a vendor contract," I said sweetly. "Signed by your assistant. Would you like to see the copy?" Her jaw tightened. "You can't be here." "I'm not your daughter tonight, Lydia," I said. "I'm your supplier." For once, she didn't have a line ready. By the time the auction began, I'd set up a tasting station near the back. Guests sipped cider, complimented the flavor, took my business cards. The cameras panned over the crowd. Mason's speech started. "Harland Orchards isn't just a brand," he said confidently. "It's a legacy reborn." Theo, standing near the press table, caught my eye. His phone buzzed once. The signal. Ironbark Estates had just executed the lien. Half the orchard now belonged to me, and in 30 seconds the rest of the world would find out. Mason clicked to the next slide on the projector, an aerial map of the property. As you can see, the image flickered, then changed. The audience gasped. On the screen, the deed transfer documents. The new boundary lines, the ironbark logo stamped across the map like a brand. Mason froze, Lydia went pale. My father, watching from the front row, sat forward sharply. Theo raised his phone, live-streaming the confusion. I stepped up to the microphone near the tasting bar. My voice carried through the speakers before anyone could stop me. "Correction," I said calmly. "Harland Orchards isn't yours anymore." Every head turned. "Half of this land belongs to Ironbark Estates," I continued. "And since I own Ironbark, I suggest you pour yourself a glass. You'll need it." Lydia's face collapsed. My father's lips parted, but no sound came. And Mason looked at me like I'd burned his world down. Maybe I had, but I built my own fire first. Silence fell across the ballroom like frost-killing late-season fruit. Mason's mouth opened and closed with no sound coming out. Lydia surged toward the stage, heels striking the hardwood like nails being hammered in. Her voice cut through the murmurs. "This is fraudulent," she hissed. "Remove that slide immediately." But the tech team wasn't listening, not to her. They were glancing nervously at Theo, who stood beside them with a court order in hand. One of the assistants checked the document, eyes widening. "It's real," he whispered to his supervisor. The room erupted. "He sold the land. To who? Is the orchard bankrupt? What does this mean for the merger?" Investors whispered urgently, fingers flying over phone screens as they checked public records. The press snapped photos at machine gun speed. Mason grabbed the microphone. This is some kind of mistake. I'm the designated heir. This land is part of the family estate. My father," his voice cracked. "Father." My father stood rigid at the front of the room, watching the collapse unfold like a man seeing his empire washed away by a tide he never anticipated. Because he didn't. Through all their scheming, through all Lydia's polished manipulation, they never imagined the daughter who left had been planting seeds of her own. I stepped forward, leaning casually against the tasting bar. Ironbark Estates purchased the orchard liens 6 months ago because someone, I looked directly at Lydia, hadn't been paying the debts. A collective inhale swept the ballroom. My father rounded on her so fast the crowd parted. "Is this true?" Lydia's jaw twitched. "William, darling, everything was under control. Answer the question." The steel in his voice silenced even the reporters. She swallowed. Her eyes darted to Mason, who remained frozen behind the podium. "The orchard's finances were temporary setbacks," she started. Thea raised his phone. "Court documents show 12 months of delinquent payments, including misallocated funds and unauthorized transfers to Urban Holdings." He paused. "A company under your maiden name." Lydia's face went white. I felt nothing, not satisfaction, not vengeance, just clarity. The kind you feel when you prune a dying branch and see the rot inside. My father staggered back. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. "You were stealing from me." "From us," Mason whispered, horror dawning. "No," Lydia snapped, dropping her mask entirely. "I was fixing your mess. The orchard was failing. We needed capital. We needed investors. Your daughter," she spat the word like a curse, "just ruined everything." "She saved it," a voice called from the crowd. Heads turned. Old Mr. Kerrigan, the longtime orchard foreman, stepped forward. His white beard trembled as he spoke. "I told you, William. The North Ridge was healthy because Wren planted it herself. The rest neglected under their watch." He glared at Lydia. "They didn't care about the land. Only the profits." The room split in two, those who saw the truth and those scrambling to distance themselves from the Millers. My father sank into a chair. "Wren," he whispered, throat tight. "Why would you do this?" I met his eyes calmly. "Because you left me no choice." "No choice?" His voice cracked with disbelief. "You gave everything to Mason. Everything. You threw me out when I wanted to stay. You broke the orchard before I ever did." A ripple of unease moved through the crowd. I stepped closer to him, lowering my voice. "Roots remember wounds, father. You taught me that, without ever meaning to." He closed his eyes. The man who had once towered like an oak was now a hollow shell beneath its own shadow. After the disaster unveiled itself, the gala fractured into clusters of whispered speculation. Investors slipped out discreetly. press huddled by exits, typing furiously. Mason's face was red and blotchy, vanity cracking like brittle bark. Lydia vanished for several minutes. I found her near the dressing lounge, pacing with her phone pressed to her ear. Through the cracked door, her voice carried sharp as winter wind. "You told me Ironbark was a small-scale holding. You told me she couldn't afford the liens." A beat of silence. "I don't care. Fix it." She ended the call with a vicious swipe and spun, finding me leaning against the doorframe. Her expression contorted. "You little weed. I took you into my home." "No," I corrected softly. "You took me into my father's home, and you spent the last decade pruning away any branch that threatened your view." Her lip curled. "You were always jealous, always small, always clinging to that dirt like it meant something." I smiled. "Funny, that dirt grew into something big enough to swallow your entire empire." Her breath hitched. For a moment, she looked like an animal cornered. Then she lunged. Her hands gripped my arms hard, nails digging in. "Listen to me," she hissed. "Do you think this makes you powerful? You bought some debt, you embarrassed us. But the orchard still belongs to your father, and he will never sign it over to you." My voice softened. "He already did." She froze. "What? 4 years ago," I said. "When he needed collateral for a business loan, he used the orchard's mineral rights as leverage, rights he never reclaimed." I held her gaze. "And I bought those too." The color drained from her face completely. "That's impossible. It's public record." A tremor ran through her, her grip loosened. The door behind us creaked open. Mason stood there, expression hollow, like someone who had just discovered his shadow could lie. "You knew," he whispered at Lydia. "Knew what?" she demanded, voice shrill. "That the land was failing, that the orchard was mortgaged, that you were draining accounts to prop up your investments. You told me everything was fine." She scoffed. "And you believed me? God, Mason, you're as naive as your father." His jaw clicked shut. Something broke in him then. Not loudly, quietly, the way frost kills flowers. He stepped aside when I walked past him. He didn't look at me, but he didn't stop me either. Back in the ballroom, the crowd had thinned into a residue of tension. My father sat alone at the front, staring at the floor. When I approached, he didn't raise his head. "Ren," he whispered, almost too softly to hear, "is there any way to reverse this?" I knelt in front of him, not out of deference, but so we were eye level. "You could have asked me for help," I said quietly. "Years ago." Silence. "You could have told me the orchard was failing. You could have admitted you needed me." His hands trembled on the armrests. "I didn't need you," he said, barely audible. "I expected you to need me." "Ah, the truth, the rotten core beneath generations of pride," I exhaled slowly. "Well, I don't." And I stood. Lydia appeared at the far side of the room, mascara streaking down her cheeks, hair unraveling from its perfect chignon. She opened her mouth, but security was already moving toward her, sent not by me, but by the event staff who'd heard enough to act. The snake was finally losing her orchard. The official foreclosure hearing took 4 weeks. 4 weeks of briefings, filings, counterfilings, and tense silence. Thea handled everything with surgical precision, while I remained focused on restoring the part of the orchard already under Ironbark's control. I'd almost forgot how much work soil demanded when it had been neglected. Tree roots exposed like bones, irrigation lines cracked, earth compacted from machinery instead of footsteps. But reclaiming that land grounded me, as if my mother's hands guided mine again. On the morning of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. Press, local farmers, and Harland family acquaintances who pretended not to stare at me. Lydia arrived in a cream suit that screamed desperation. Her lawyer marched beside her like a man already preparing for defeat. Mason didn't show. My father entered last. He carried himself like a storm-down tree, still upright but scarred. The judge reviewed the documentation, flipping through exhibits with brisk efficiency. "Miss Harland," she said, adjusting her glasses, "the evidence shows that your holding company purchased the liens legally. You also own adjoining parcels essential to orchard access." "Yes, Your Honor." "And you intend to maintain agricultural use of the land?" "Yes." Her gaze sharpened. "Unlike urban holdings?" "That's correct." A faint smile. "Then the court recognizes Ironbark Estates as the primary title holder of the Harland properties. The foreclosure is approved." Lydia gasped, a short, sharp sound like a branch snapping. My father flinched. The judge continued, Furthermore, due to intentional misrepresentation of financial standing, the court authorizes a forensic audit of the Harland family trust. Lydia nearly collapsed. Her lawyer steadied her, face grim. I stood calmly. Inside, something unfurled, something I had buried long ago. Not triumph, not malice, but justice. A restoration of balance. As people began filing out of the courtroom, my father approached me. His voice was gravel. "You've destroyed everything." I met his gaze evenly. Number Lydia did. He opened his mouth to argue, but stopped, because the truth hung heavy in the air. "I offered you everything," he whispered. "You offered Mason everything," I corrected. "You offered me chores and silence." He lowered his head, and for a brief second I almost felt pity. But pity was a luxury I no longer owed him. I turned and walked out into the sunlight, warm, crisp, golden, like the beginning of apple season. Later that afternoon, I gathered my team at the ridge where the orchard met the old stone wall. Hank, Sarah, and 3 new hires who'd been helping restore the land. "We're replanting the South Rose tomorrow," I told them. "Red Spitzenbergs, Honeycrisps, and the heirloom variety my mom had grafted before she died." Sarah smiled softly. "She'd be proud of you." I swallowed the tightness in my throat. "I hope so." Just then, a familiar voice called from the slope. "Wren," I turned. Mason stood there, unkempt hair, wrinkled clothes, a man stripped of pretense. "I need to talk to you," he said, hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Not to fight, to explain." I dismissed the crew with a nod. They drifted away. Mason exhaled shakily. "I didn't know Lydia was using my name for the shell companies. I thought she believed in me." His voice wavered. "I didn't realize she was bleeding the estate dry." "That's not my fault," I said gently. "No, but I didn't help you either." His jaw tightened. "You deserved better." I studied him. He looked smaller, human, maybe for the first time. "Are you asking for forgiveness?" I asked quietly. He shook his head. "No, I'm asking if I can work for you." My breath caught not in shock, but in recognition of a cycle shifting. There it was, the fallen heir seeking a new orchard. I let the silence stretch before answering. "Maybe," I said at last, "but not today." He nodded, accepting, not defeated. Then he walked away. The first frost of winter came early. I stood at the north ridge, breath fogging in crisp white clouds as the sky blushed lavender. The orchard stretched around me, my orchard, rows of young trees wrapped for the season, old trunks reinforced, soil enriched after months of labor. Behind me stood the restored farmhouse, renovated from the dilapidated barn my father had abandoned long ago. Its windows glowed warm with morning light. Inside, I heard laughter, Sarah's granddaughter visiting, Hank telling one of his long-winded stories, my team sharing cinnamon rolls I'd baked before sunrise. Real family, chosen, not inherited. My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "It's done. The trust has been dissolved. My parents are leaving town." "Mason," I typed back, "thank you. Take care of yourself. No more bitterness. No more rivalry, just release." I pocketed the phone and continued down the slope, boots crunching frost-crusted leaves. The orchard smelled faintly of smoke and cold apples, clean, honest scents. When I reached the edge of the property, I paused at the newest addition, a carved wooden sign mounted on 2 cedar posts. "Ironbark Orchards founded by Wren Harland, rooted in resilience, grown with truth." A soft wind rustled through the branches overhead, and for one fleeting moment, I felt my mother beside me, her presence woven through bark and soil and memory. "You did it," she whispered in my mind. No, we did. A car door shut behind me. I turned to find Theo approaching, hands in his pockets, scarf wrapped against the cold. "You ready?" he asked. "For what?" He nodded toward the road. A small group had gathered there, local reporters, cider enthusiasts, and 2 agricultural commissioners. Today marked the official reopening of the orchard under my name. "You built something worth celebrating," he said. My chest tightened with something warm. "You helped," Theo shrugged. "I follow the smart clients." I laughed softly. We walked together toward the group. As they welcomed me with cameras and warm greetings, I thought back to the girl who once stood invisible at her family's gala, covered in dirt, used as a punchline. Not anymore. One of the commissioners handed me a ceremonial ribbon-cutting shears. "Miss Harland," she said, "on behalf of the county, we congratulate you on the preservation and revival of one of our oldest agricultural estates." You've done something remarkable. I took the shears. The crowd quieted. Behind me, rows of apple trees stood like soldiers in early winter light. Ahead of me lay the future I cultivated with my own hands, every cut, every graft, every sacrifice shaping this moment. I lifted the shears, the ribbon fluttered. With honor, I said, I reclaim what was always mine. The blades closed with a satisfying snip. Applause rose like birds taking flight, and the orchard, my orchard, breathed with me, alive, rooted, finally free.